you know about purification to save the heart of a nation. Let burn a talking wood, bringing light to a talking wood. Natural law, just wisdom and love, vision, truth below as a bird. Let burn a talking wood, let burn a talking wood.
Welcome to Natural Law Presentation 7, where we will be exploring the topic of trying to escape or avoid love and truth will always lead to suffering. And as always, I want to invite you to visit the website, affirmlifedaily.com, for affirmations, resources, great videos. There's just tons of information there. I've also recently added a product section where there's great products that you can help it benefit you health-wise, spiritual-wise, things like that. So I definitely want you to check that out. So let's get into the topics that we'll be exploring today. So we're going to dive deep into the following questions. How are love and truth related? What is human suffering and what are the causes? Is suffering a necessary part of the human experience? What can we learn from our suffering and how do we end suffering? So these are just the 15 topics that I'll be covering through the Natural Law series. We are on number 7 right now. If you want to read through these, I'm not going to read through them now, but if you want to look at any of them, past or future, upcoming, you can go to the website on the Natural Law page and you'll see all of this information there. So let's start. So how are love and truth related? That's kind of the foundation of what we're talking about. So I want to make sure, as far as terminology and definitions, that we're all on the same page of what I'm talking about as I proceed through the presentation. So what is love? Love is the fundamental vibration of the one consciousness in the universe. So truth can be kind of thought of as the sound of love's vibration. Love and truth are intertwined and lead to the same harmonious destination, which is freedom, order, and peace. So when you try to deny truth or back away from truth or, close your eyes and cover your ears, you move away from love. You move away from nature and you move away from the source or one consciousness or God, however you want to refer to it. Whenever you deny truth, you move away from those things as well. So what is truth? Truth is simply what is. It's reality. It is a fundamental, a foundational truth is that our source consciousness is love. So I know a lot of times these days there's very convoluted definitions of truth, but truth is very simple. It simply is what is. So truth is objective and not subjective. So if truth were subjective, the world would literally lose all of its meaning. It would just be someone's perspective about everything. And we would just be like drowning in a sea of, moral relativism. Whatever suits this situation. Oh, it's moral today, maybe not moral tomorrow. Moral in this city, immoral in that city. So these are objective things, not subjective things. So at the base, at the root, fundamentally, love and truth are, pretty much synonymous terms. There is so much power in truth. And that's why love is so powerful, because they are connected and intertwined. The connection between truth and love. I found 3 quotes that I thought really captured this connection very powerfully and poetically. The first is, do not accept anything as love which lacks truth. That is a quote by St. Edith Stein. Another quote, telling someone the truth is an act of love. That I just could not say that better myself, because we definitely live in a world full of a lot of sugarcoating and false niceties. And that isn't love. Sometimes love can be a tough pill to swallow, because truth can be a tough pill to swallow. But if someone is lying to you and at the same breath telling you that it's out of love or that they love you, it's just, that's not correct, because truth and love, they go together. You cannot speak an untruth to someone and say that wasn't an act of love. So love is the force that creates harmony and order, brings light to the darkness, and expands consciousness and awareness of self. That's a quote by Mark Passio, who obviously I mentioned him a lot, and I still highly recommend that you check out his work. There's a lot of his work on my website too, but his website is whatonearthishappening.com. videos, his podcast, amazing. This man is a wealth of knowledge if you really want a deep understanding of the occult and of natural law. So all these slides will be posted as a PDF when I post this to my website after the video is edited. And these are hyperlinks this time. So you'll actually be able to click directly from there. There's also links to any of the sites that I'm referencing on my website already if you go to the resources page. So love and truth cannot be divided. We will change this world through love and truth. These are actually synonymous terms. When we live in truth, we live in love. It is the love for self, for our children, the love for our family, the love for humanity, nature, freedom, and creation in its wholeness in itself that will fuel our courage as we take that which is rightfully ours. So when I speak about what's rightfully ours, I'm talking about our freedom, our God-given rights that we are born into this world with, that are being stripped away at a pace that is so rapid, it's mind-blowing at this point. But these are rightfully ours. We are born free. And so what I'm talking about when we're talking about the courage that's take that back, that's what I'm talking about. What is rightfully ours, our freedom, our right to live free. So let's jump into it. What is human suffering and what are the causes? Human suffering is a prolonged state of emotional, physical, and or spiritual pain and distress that reaches a point of feeling just unbearable, like intolerable. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about suffering in this presentation. So much unnecessary suffering comes into the world because people will not accept the legitimate suffering that comes from being human. Now, I put, legitimate suffering there in quotes because we're going to explore that term a little more later, and you'll understand why I put that in quotes here. But this is a quote by Carl Jung. This is another person whose work I highly recommend if you've never checked it out. He's a psychiatrist and psychologist that has some very profound work that really you can definitely relate it back to natural law, to spirituality, and to alchemy. So what are some of the main causes of suffering? Now, obviously, this is not all the causes of, possible suffering, but these are some of the main causes that I wanted to explore during the presentation. So let's talk about, again, that legitimate suffering. So this just refers to organic suffering that's just inherent to life in this 3D experience, this 3D realm. So examples of this would be, a really bad heartbreak, where you just feel like, oh, I cannot go on. My heart is so broken. Tremendous loss, serious illness, maybe your own illness, maybe the illness of a loved one, or, just major life altering setbacks. All of these can be considered, maybe legitimate suffering, because all these things are just things that happen to you in life, things that you can't control, things that you can't stop. They just happen as part of the experience here. So also another cause, denial of truth and love, which leads back to what I was just talking about. So failure to engage and embrace truth and love leads to living in a state of unconsciousness. That unconsciousness it's a breeding ground. It's a total breeding ground for disconnection from source, or you can say God, and reality itself, the reality inside of you and the reality outside of you. When you are unconscious, you are not in touch with it. And that inevitably leads to suffering. Separation. Suffering will result when we view ourselves separate from nature, separate from others, and separate from the one consciousness. So when you see yourself as separate, that's when you start to engage in all those behaviors like manipulation, dominance, your belief in authority, hierarchy. You want to control dynamics. You want to control others because you need to protect yourself, because you see yourself as separate. So you automatically start falling into these patterns of behavior. You either want to be dominated or want to dominate, because again, you want protection from the world around you because you don't see your connection to it. And you don't understand that hurting another is hurting yourself. So you're going to end up in a cycle of suffering when you live in a state of separation. Spiritual starvation. In our current culture, I have to say this is a huge, huge problem, spiritual starvation. So lack of spiritual nourishment, knowledge of spiritual or energetic essence, and disconnecting from nature leaves us malnourished spiritually. This hunger leads us directly to suffering emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Because we are spiritual beings. That is what we are. We are consciousness. We are spiritual beings. We are that spiritual energy. That is who we are. We create this form to have this experience through our spiritual energy, through our spiritual essence. So when that is malnourished, I mean, you are in a bad predicament right now, because you are not feeding the very nature of your being. You're leaving it starved. You're leaving it malnourished. So you can, bet on it. You can bet on suffering emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. It's inherent in that starvation, in that spiritual starvation. So is suffering necessary for the human condition? I'm going to explore this from some different perspectives with some different angles, but I wanted to start here with one of the more common perspectives. Suffering is part and parcel of the human condition, but suffering can either embitter or ennoble us. It can ennoble us and become a spirituality of transformation when we find meaning in it. That's a quote by Desmond Tutu. So this is a common perspective on human suffering, but is suffering actually a choice? When consciousness is not present, suffering usually takes its place. And we are given the choice to become conscious by examining the relevancy of our experience and the events that acted as catalysts to our new understandings, or to cycle into suffering. Hence the ancient wisdom, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Quote by Sarah Elkaldi. Another person, check her out. She is very phenomenal, gives some deep, powerful information. The link to her website is there. She's known as The Alchemist. So I recommend her work as well, and her spiritual healing work that she offers too. So when we are conscious, what we think of as legitimate suffering can be viewed as simply a temporary or transient state of pain and discomfort that will ultimately lead us to healing, growth, and spiritual evolution. But you can only see it that way if you are in a state of consciousness. So if you decide to suffer, you absolutely 100% will suffer. And right now, culturally, I would say there's a serious issue with addiction to suffering. Man is sometimes extraordinarily, passionately in love with suffering. And I can't agree with that quote more. And I have to say, I absolutely went through a phase where I was addicted to suffering, addicted to being, constantly depressed, being in that state of that victimhood mentality. Oh, woe is me. What do I do? The world's doing this to me and they're doing that to me, and never looking at what I'm doing to me or not doing for me. So I had to really change my mindset and do a lot of transmutation and a lot of self-alchemy with what I was feeling to release that need to be addicted to suffering as a way to deal with some of the painful emotions that I didn't want to be present within me, that I didn't want to integrate as part of myself and eventually transmute. So when we perpetually and usually subconsciously, we usually do this at a subconscious level, seek suffering and victimhood, it has become an addiction and a way of life. So we need to look at, how do we get out of this pattern? How do we get out of this mentality, this vicious cycle of suffering? So suffering is necessary until it is not. Suffering can act as a catalyst to awaken you. Then once awakened, the suffering is no longer necessary for spiritual growth and evolution. So what is awakening? It's that deeper connection to spirit, to truth, to the one consciousness or God that is rooted in awareness and acceptance of what is. It is opening up that heart center, that Christ consciousness. So what is the answer? Is the answer yes, or is the answer no? Is suffering really necessary? Well, yes and no. If you had not suffered as you have, there would be no depth to you as a human being, no humility, no compassion. You would not be reading this now. Suffering cracks open the shell of the ego, and then comes a point when it has served its purpose. Suffering is necessary until you realize it is unnecessary. I thought that quote perfectly summarized, one of the main points I wanted to get to here, that quote by Eckhart Tolle. Because it is, can be a definite yes or no things, because it's necessary until it's not, because it may very well be necessary for you to get to that point that it is no longer necessary. It all starts inside of us. We are collectively creating this reality. And if we don't become conscious of how and why we are creating what we are creating, then we are bound to keep manifesting realities that are not in our best interest and that we don't really want. We have to raise our consciousness and awareness, or we will stay stuck in this loop of disharmony, suffering, and fear. So, as we awaken, we recognize that we don't need to become conscious because we are consciousness. That's what we are, consciousness. We just have to recognize and remember that. Once we become aware, then we are no longer walking in that unconscious state. And when we are aware, we realize we don't have to be in this state of suffering. But if we don't, suffering is going to be the end result. So what can we learn from our suffering? And I am not about to try to pronounce this name, but this Tibetan monk points out 4 benefits of suffering: wisdom, resilience, compassion, and a deep respect for reality. So let's talk about wisdom. From suffering, we can gain deep insight into ourselves, the world around us, our connections, and the areas of ourselves that need healing, that need integration, that may need transmutation. These insights can become wisdom if we take the time to understand it, accept it, and then we can take transformative action at that point. And that transformative action will be in wisdom. Resilience. When we make it through great suffering, suffering that we thought that would be impossible to overcome, we appreciate just how resilient, powerful, and courageous we actually are. And I can speak to this just from a recent experience that I'll share. 2 years ago, I lost my husband of 27 years. And when I tell you, you're talking about some suffering, it was probably the darkest, most impactful as far as emotionally, spiritually experience that I've ever had in my life. And I was not sure I would make it through it. But when you do, when you come out that other side, the resilience, the understanding you have of how powerful you are, what you have the ability to overcome, it's life altering in every way possible. So resilience is definitely something you can learn from suffering. Compassion. After we experience suffering, it usually will make us more empathetic and compassionate to the suffering of others because we know what that feels like. So yeah, I'm going to have empathy for you. I'm going to have compassion. I'm going to care. That 8th lost hermetic principle of true care. I'm going to care because I know what it feels like because I went through it. Respect for reality. This ties directly into how suffering comes from denial of truth and denial of reality. The resistance to both will invariably, every time, without fail, lead to suffering. We must embrace reality fully, both the light and dark polarities, all of it. We have to take it all in and respect it. If we don't, suffering will follow. So suffering has a noble purpose, the evolution of consciousness and the burning up of the ego. Now, I've talked a lot in past presentations about the ego, and the ego is not something that's bad. It's not something you need to hide from. The ego is important. It's inherent to this experience that we're having in this 3D realm. It serves a purpose. The problem with the ego that we're seeing is it's taken over. It's out of complete balance. It's all ego, no spirituality, just maybe a little tiny bit or almost none nowadays with a lot of society. So that's the issue. So when I incorporate this quote, and I'm not going to give it meaning for his intention. I can't speak for him. But for me, when I'm talking about the ego, I'm talking about it just needs to be in balance. It is a tool. It's very useful, but it cannot be out of control. So can we discover our true nature through suffering? Absolutely. Yes, we can. So what is our true nature? Let's talk about what our true nature is. We are eternal spiritual energy that takes different forms as we learn and progress through our evolutionary journey, which is a spiritual journey. Everything and everyone is connected. Everything is connected and part of the one consciousness. All is mental creation, and that we are collectively creating the reality around us. So this refers back to the I bring this up a lot in my presentations, the Hermetic principles. This is something that I absolutely recommend that you study if you are interested in natural law, if you are interested in spirituality, if you are interested in awakening and consciousness, any of that. It's imperative to understand and have a very good grasp of the Hermetic principles, because they're the principles that actually are the principles that preside over the realm that we're in, the universe that we're in. So understanding them is imperative. Duality is inherent to our nature. That is based on another Hermetic principle. So we must embrace and integrate all parts of ourselves, the dark and the light. Most importantly, we can stop self-inflicted suffering and discover that suffering is no longer necessary to evolve. Suffering ends when we stop fearing things we can't avoid. And I feel like that is just a big part of even a lot with the New Age spirituality movement. Oh, that's negative. And let's just block it out. Let's just put on huge blinders about everything we don't like about the world and everything we don't like about ourselves, and just not acknowledge it. Then it won't be there. No, no, you can't avoid life. So the things that are painful, the things that hurt, the things that are difficult and challenging are all the same things that will make us grow, that will inspire us, that will encourage us, that can strengthen us, and that are just part of this experience. They're part of this experience for a reason. We have to remember that. So don't avoid them. Go full force into them. But do it from a state of consciousness, from awareness, from a point of view is, what can I learn? How can I grow? So the suffering we do now is not necessary at all. Struggle and hardships are necessary in general, but we have an imbalance in self-inflicted suffering. This is a quote by meditation coach Soul. He was a recent guest on my podcast. And I recommend you check him out as well. He is a brilliant meditation coach, very knowledgeable in both meditation and natural law and many other things. So check out his work as well. But I wanted to include that quote by him because I thought he stated that and encapsulated that very well. So how do we end suffering? We can end our suffering by fully embracing natural law, love, and truth. Suffering only ends when we are ready and in a place where we recognize that it is no longer necessary for us to experience that suffering to learn and evolve. When we reach this level through enhanced awareness of our consciousness and understanding at our core that we are eternal spiritual beings and we are powerful, powerful creators. That means even the most painful experiences in this realm can never diminish or change the essence of who we are. When we can remember that, when we really embrace that, like as part of our being, it changes everything. It changes everything about your life, the way you view your life, the way you view the painful experiences that you go through. When you understand your nature as an eternal spiritual being and that you are a powerful creator. So truly ending our suffering is absolutely up to us. So I wanted to end this presentation again, like last time, with an affirmation. So you can either, kind of say it along with me silently or out loud, however you want to do it, or just kind of listen as I state it. But I just really think I'm kind of probably going to incorporate this more because I think it's just a good way to end these presentations with that positivity that comes from affirmation. So this is an awareness affirmation. I stay in a state of awareness. I release the need to blind myself from what is. I let go of the suffering, fears, and beliefs that blind me. I understand at a soul level that growth, healing, and evolution are all rooted in awareness. My willingness to embrace truth and create harmony within my life requires me to be aware of what surrounds me and of what's inside of me. Awareness is power. Awareness brings forth strength. Awareness is essential to living an authentic life. I am aware. And so it is. I absolutely want to thank you so much for joining me for this Natural Law Presentation 7. As always, please visit the website for more information, resources, ways to connect. Please follow me on social media and subscribe to my YouTube page as well. They're all at Affirm Life Daily. There are also links to it on my website at affirmlifedaily.com. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, infinite gratitude, love, and light. Y'all have an amazing evening.